Our next step on the vest is going to be ironing our interfacing onto our welt and our front facing. So I've got my pieces kind of organized. I have them pinned together. So I've got the pieces that I need, interfacing and fabric. I've got a pressing cloth. I'm using a pressing mat. You'd probably be using your ironing board. And then I have my iron. So I know I've talked a lot about how steam is the thing that really makes everything kind of work when we're using an iron. It pushes the heat through. You actually don't want to use steam with interfacing because it can cause it to pucker and wrinkle a little bit. So I'm going to start with our smaller pieces. Let's start with our welts. Now we're going to, remember how I talked about how it's hard to, you can see it a little bit, but really to know right from wrong on the interfacing is to feel that rough side where the glue is. So where the glue is the wrong side. That's the side that's going to go against the fabric. And I've got my right sides and my wrong sides of my fabric, and I want to iron this onto the wrong side, right? Because if I put it on the right side, I've negated the face, and there's no point. All right, so this goes inside. Again, interfacing is something that goes on an area that you just need a little bit more reinforcement, or something that maybe needs to be a little stiffer or have some more substance in the garment. And with the welts, you've got a lot of wear and tear if you have a real pocket of going in and out, and it also just helps it look more structural and finished. So that's why it's going on the welts. For the front facing, that's where our closure is going to be. We'll have those buttons and buttonholes, so having the interfacing there is going to kind of make that last a little longer. All right, so I've got my pattern pieces wrong side up. I'm going to take my interfacing and I'm going to put it glue side down. I'm going to match up the piece so that they're right on top of each other. You want to try, hopefully these are going to fit well and they fit inside the fabric and they're not overlapping, because anything that's overlapping onto your ironing surface will get glued to it. So they do make silicone sheets that you can put on your ironing surface to help prevent any issues if there is some overlap. That you can use a Silipat from baking, but they make some that are specifically for ironing. Now sometimes some of this glue, if there's a lot of glue on it, might come through the right side a little bit and could get on your iron. So I do recommend using a pressing cloth whenever you're using interfacing. And a pressing cloth is just a lightweight piece of fabric, such as muslin or lightweight cotton. And if you saw, I laid that down very gently on over the top of these because I didn't want the interfacing to shift. All right, so I have my fabric wrong side up. I've got the interfacing glue side down on the fabric. I've got my pressing cloth in place. I have my iron without water in it, and I've got it on a fairly high setting, but you don't need it on the highest setting. And what you're going to do is you're just going to set the iron on top and just let it rest there for now. You don't want to slide it back and forth because you don't want to shift that interfacing around. So we're going to leave it there like maybe 30 seconds, pick that up and move it to another place. And again, we're just going to move this around over our piece of fabric and interfacing, pausing for about 30 seconds each time. You want to make sure you're covering the entire area so you don't leave your corners out or anything like that. And then when this is done, these two fabrics will now be one fabric. They will be fused together. The interfacing will be glued on to the fabric. I mentioned that there is sew-in interfacing as well, non-fusible. That's again used primarily in tailoring. Tailoring is like men's suits and things like that. It's a much more complex sewing process. And one of the reasons some people don't like using the fusible interfacing is because sometimes it can kind of pucker, or it changes the hand of the fabric more, and we're trying to do that to an extent, but it's a bit more severe when you're using fusible interfacing than when you're using sew-in interfacing. So it's just sew-in can be just a little more precise and you're helping the fabric that you're working with, the hand of it, remain kind of more true. All right, so now we'll pull our pressing cloth back, and we're going to just kind of check this. Now, I did not get a good fuse on that corner. Everywhere else, it's adhered very well. So obviously I'm going to have to go back over that. This one, I've got another corner that's not real happy. So you also want to make sure your iron's hot before you start. My iron I had on and it had turned itself off. So you just want to kind of keep an eye on it, make sure that it's actually hot when you're ready to use it. And this is basically the process for any fusible interfacing. Make sure that you've got, and it can kind of shrink a little. So again, this is a non-woven fusible interfacing. There are woven interfacings. Those might actually shrink a little bit, but if it's fusible, you can't really pre-shrink it with the iron or even washing. So sometimes people will just kind of hover the iron above that. So it'll give it a little heat, so it might shrink. But that's just a thing that's one of the reasons why wovens tend to be more non-fusible than fusible. That corner does not want to steak. Maybe it needs to be hotter. So that's basically the whole process, right? So once we get this done, we're going to do this with the welts. And then we also need to do that with our front facing. Right, I've got to have glue side down, so that's going to tell you which piece matches with which. Now the interfacing is stiffer and it's going to be more true to shape than the fabric piece. So if they aren't quite lining up, then you might just kind of nudge the fabric piece around a little so that it kind of fits that way. All right, and that's your process. So you don't need to watch me just sit here with the iron on this. So just remember that the fabric goes face side down, wrong side up, and then the interfacing goes glue side to the fabric. You want to use a presser cloth. You want no steam, relatively high heat, and you want your iron to be placed. You want to pick it up and place it here and there instead of sliding it back and forth. That's the essential processes for your interfacing. Thank you very much.